Good evening, all present for this webinar. I hope I am audible to all of you. And uh, let's begin with the introduction of our host, Ms. Neha Sinha. She is working as a policy officer with BNHS. She is also a nature writer, and her columns appear in many different newspapers across India. She has studied conservation science at Oxford University. She also loves looking at nature and talking about it with her colleagues. I welcome Ms. Neha Sinha for this webinar, and thanks for joining us. Uh, Next slide, please.
Are you telling me? Okay, one sec. There.
Okay, so for all those people who don't know about our organization, I will give a brief introduction. So BNHS, or Bombay Natural History Society, was founded in 1883. It is one of the largest non-governmental organization which is engaged in conservation and research of biodiversity. The photograph we all are seeing on the screen is our Hornbill House, is our headquarters, which is situated in the fort at Mumbai, Maharashtra. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll talk now about Conservation Education Center, which is also a part of BNHS. It is situated in the Goregaon Film City, and it works towards creating the awareness about nature amongst students, government employees, corporate people, and so on. It also has a diverse activities like nature trails, workshops, and various certificate courses in biodiversity studies. So in case if you are enthusiast and want to join any of these courses, you may refer their website, which is given in the slide, or you may contact them. Uh, Okay, these are the courses which are available: leadership course, then basic ornithology course, basic course in herpetology, then butterfly studies, and basic course in botany. Further, we will talk about Environmental Information System, or ENVIS in short. ENVIS was established in 1996 by the MOEF and CC, that is the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Um, Especially BNHS is working on the avian ecology part. Then the focus of establishing this department was providing the information to decision makers, policy planners, and scientists uh, all over the country. We have the following objectives. The first and most important is to create various data banks on birds and related areas, so that can be provided whenever they are needed. Secondly, we publish and distribute Buceros, which is a newsletter, which is a free newsletter, and then we also upload data banks on website and provide knowledge or spread knowledge to the world. We also conduct various certificate courses under Green Skill Development Program, which enables the tribal youth of India to get the job opportunities. Also, we are working on grid-based decision system. So for further any details, you may visit our website bnhsenvis.nic.in. And without any delay, I would now request Ms. Neha Sinha to continue the webinar.
Thank you so much, Viraj. I hope everybody can hear me. If there are any problems, or if there are any queries or questions you have, please write it in the chat box, and Viraj or Priyanka will raise the questions with me. Okay, so today we're going to talk about nature journaling. So for those of you who don't know, a nature journal is a way to observe nature every day to keep a journal with our findings, and basically try to see the same thing every day. And before I go further, I want to go back in history a little bit. Know about the Bengal tiger. You see it on the screen over here. Now, the Bengal tiger is being attacked by a Magar crocodile. The Magar crocodile name comes from Magarmach, the Hindi word. So basically, earlier, when we didn't have photographs, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Facebook, people used to record nature by making illustrations like this one. So this is from the book by Richard Ledecker. He was a famous naturalist, and a lot of nature was understood by people who would take the time to draw, or they would get the specimen of the animal, that is capture the animal, and then paint it and draw it and describe it. And that is the beginning of the nature journaling that happened. And that is also the beginning of what we call natural history, which is the history of nature. Now we have photographs and cameras, so now we don't have to make beautiful paintings, which is much harder to do. So it's, in many ways, it's easier today to observe nature or to journal nature. This is another really interesting one. This is 1895, The Tiger and the Signalman, a railway incident in North India, probably from Dudhwa landscape. So whatever people used to observe, not just the features of the animal, not just the anatomy or the morphology, but also the behavior of the animal. So this must have happened somewhere, that the tiger has come, and even at that time the railway lines were disturbing the animals, and so the tiger has come and the man has climbed the railway pole to save himself. So we have many interesting records, and they come from nature journals by various different historians or naturalists in India and many parts of the world. This is a beautiful Mughal painting. I showed it in my last webinar also because I really love it. It is another illustration of birds found in India. So you can see there's a kind of like a swan creature on the left. There's probably some kind of falcon below. There's a peacock on top. There's a heron in the middle, a couple of goose near the heron, and then on the right side of the goose you have the parakeet. Above the parakeet you have the hoopoe, and right below you have, I think perhaps it's an egret. So basically, art was used to observe nature and to record it. So if these paintings had not been made, it would be difficult for us to understand what kind of nature was around people and what kind of impressions nature left on people. These are a couple of illustrations made by Rohan Chakravarti, who's a cartoonist. The first is the Indian robin, and the second is the picture wing, which is a dragonfly. And he calls this the home biodiversity series. Now, if all of us could paint or draw, I'm sure we would all be interested to draw our life. And when we are small children, I think we're all nature artists, and we all have journals, because all of us, the first paintings we make, the first drawings we make are always of animals and mountains and trees and things like that, flowers and butterflies. I think when we become older, we forget, to see what all is around us. So nature journaling is a way to reconnect really with what is around us. And I'm going to help you today to understand how you can record nature and how you can write about it also. So the Indian robin, before I go to the next slide, Indian robin is actually endemic. It is an Indian species endemic to the Indian subcontinent. And the male is a beautiful black, the female is brown in color. Okay, now I just wanted to show you these beautiful butterflies, which have been, this video has actually been shot today. So these are the pioneer butterflies, and they have come to this neem tree. And I will explain in a second why flowering is very important in nature journaling. When a big tree flowers, especially if it is an Indian tree, which supports a lot of species, it's a very big event for all the birds and the bees and the butterflies and even the bats, because the flowering of a tree is a very big and important food source for many creatures. And it is an important time in the calendar of what we call phenology. Phenology is flowering or fruiting, basically the time at which a tree or a plant does something. So these are pioneer butterflies, and they come on the neem every single day, and they're very beautiful, and they're also quite beautifully camouflaged with the white colored neem flowers. So I basically want to start with putting this idea in your mind that if you look closely, then everything is beautiful. The idea is to look, the idea is to look and look hard. So this is actually grass seeds, and you can see how beautiful they are. And oftentimes people look at nature, and people only look at, you know, things that are very obvious, such as, you know, maybe a tiger or a leopard or a, you know, a dolphin, like the big things. But, you know, actually there are many small things in nature, and nature is all around us. If you learn how to look, then you will be very surprised by how interesting and how beautiful and how exciting the lives of animals and biodiversity around us is. So basically, the first principle that I want to share with you is that nature journaling is noticing the same thing every day and trying to keep a record of it. Okay, so this is the moon which I shot on April 27th. So it's like a crescent moon, the Eid ka Chand, and after that on May 4th, I'm taking photographs of the same thing every day, but I'm seeing how it's changing, how it looks beautiful, and how, you know, how much light it gives in the sky, which part of the sky it rises in, which part of the sky it goes down in. And I'm noticing the same thing every single day and keeping a record of it. So I take pictures and I write down the date, and I write down the file name of the photograph describing the image, whether it's a moon or a bird or a butterfly, and that's how I create a record. I will tell you more about that. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the important things that can go into your nature journal. The first is flowering. As I told you, flowering is a very important event that happens, especially if it's a Indian species, because Indian species typically are evolved to give food to the other Indian biodiversity. So a tree like Semal, a tree like Palash, they're very important food sources for birds and other biodiversity. So flowering is an important aspect of your nature journal. We'll come to it in a minute. The second, of course, is feeding. So any animal and the way that it feeds is an important thing for us to observe and to know what animal eats what, how much it has to search, you know. It's not like us that we can order food, or, you know, we go to a restaurant and eat it. Animals have to spend a lot of time foraging, which is finding food. It's not just about eating the food, it is also about finding it. And it's a long process and a difficult process. The third is courtship. You know, different animals will have different behavior to find a mate, and sometimes they change color in many birds and butterflies as well. After that comes nesting, very important life cycle process and very interesting for us to observe. So this is the nesting season for many birds in India right now. So usually it is springtime, end of springtime, beginning of summer. And also for many species, monsoon time is an important time for nesting. Then this migration, which is such an interesting phenomenon. Birds come to India from all corners of the world. They come from Europe, they come from Central Asia. Some birds fly from India to Sri Lanka to Southeast Asia and come back to India and then go back to Asia or Europe. So it's a very magical and interesting phenomena that happens every year, sometimes twice a year, depending on the species we're talking about. Then finally, the most important aspect in conservation are the interrelationships. So what is the relationship of the species that you're studying to the other things around it? For example, these are two coppersmith barbets, a common garden bird, a beautiful bird, and they're both sitting, it's actually a pair, and they're sitting on a peepal tree because they're feeding from this peepal tree. The relationship they have with the tree is that this is a food source for them. And we also try to understand interrelationships in nature journaling. So let's start with the first one, the flowering. Perhaps the most beautiful thing to observe. Right now, many beautiful Indian trees are flowering, such as the amaltas, which is the next slide. This is the Semal tree, and the Semal tree only flowers once in a year. This is an oriental magpie robin sitting on the Semal tree. And once the Semal flowers, it's incredible because a lot of birds and bats and butterflies and bees will come on this tree. So it's what is known as a keystone species, meaning it is a species with a very important role in the ecosystem. So when you start a nature journal, perhaps you have not started yet, a good time to start is when a tree that you can observe has started flowering. It's very good to start your journal with plants because plants form the basis of any ecosystem. So you can start by observing a tree such as a laburnum or an amalthas tree which has just started flowering, and you can start taking observations. So for example, this is the phenology, which means flowering, fruiting of the Semal, which is the Wombax ceiba. So this is how the tree used to look in April. It was covered in these beautiful red flowers. As you can see, the leaves have been dropped, and it is, just flowers, very little leaves. By May, in just a month's time, the flowers have gone, the leaves have come out, and if you can see the white stuff, that is the kind of this silk cotton that comes out of this tree, which is how the tree is also known as a silk cotton tree. So what am I doing over here? I'm starting my nature journal by observing this tree. So I'm writing down what's happening with this tree every few days. I actually do it every day. You can do it as many times as you like. It can be once a week, it can be once in 2 days. And by observing what is going on with the tree, what are the birds that come on the tree or the other biodiversity, that's an excellent way to start your nature journal. I'm giving you another example. This is the amalthas, also known as the Indian laburnum. It's not really a laburnum tree, but it is also known as Indian laburnum. So amalthas is this gorgeous yellow tree. Nobody can forget this tree. Just like the Semal, when the amalthas is blooming once a year, it is full of flowers. The leaves fall almost completely, and the tree has these beautiful like chandeliers of yellow flowers. So the graph that you see on the left has been created by Season Watch. I will tell you more about Season Watch in a bit. It is basically an organization that does citizen science in which they collect data on nature, which is like what is the flowering or what are the kind of birds found in an area, where are the trees in an area, when are they flowering. So this graph is then they had studied basically the flowering of the amalthas tree. And if you see the red bars on the graph, that is the Vishu, which is an important festival in Kerala. And the basically the slopes of the graph show you at where the tree, how many trees have flowered around Vishu time. So as you can see, in 2015, some of the amalthas have flowered much before Vishu. In 2016, the flowers, the trees have flowered on Vishu. On 2017, it's a little before, and in 2018, they have not flowered on Vishu. Now, you will say, what is the use of this information? Is it just for mad people who like flowers? But actually, it's very important to have this kind of information because as we know, the climate is changing. There's a lot of global warming and a lot of patterns have changed. So birds, animals, biodiversity is also changing accordingly. And everything is important. Every change is important for us to monitor. And the more people monitor or keep nature journals and contribute to citizen science, the more we can begin to understand the different trends that are happening or the differences in our natural world. I will tell you more about citizen science at the very end. The next important aspect for nature journals is feeding. Now, obviously, we all need to eat to live, and the same is true for wildlife. And as I said, feeding is not just about the animal eating food, it is about the animal searching for food. A lot of wildlife will spend a lot of time trying to find food, and this is actually a young red-naped ibis, and it's foraging on a Semal flower. These birds eat snakes, so it's really surprising that it's doing this. Maybe it has found an insect inside the flower, or maybe it eats parts of the flowers. We would never know unless we study it more. And if you have a nature journal, if you're interested in nature and you see such an observation, it's a very uncommon thing. We don't know much about nature even now, so therefore every observation becomes important. When I saw this bird eating what looked like a flower, it was very interesting. I shared it with lots of bird watchers. Everyone was surprised No one has seen this bird showing this kind of behavior because it's a hunter and a carnivore otherwise. And everyone thought it was extremely interesting. On the left, you have the brown-headed barbet on a samel flower. It's drinking nectar. On the right, you have a purple sunbird, beautiful bird, another common bird. And it has come on the Indian laburnum or the amalthas. Now, the amalthas has not flowered yet. It's waiting and it's just checking out if there could be some nectar. Again, a very interesting thing to watch, because it's really satisfying when you're watching a wild animal and it finds food. Usually in the city, if you're in a city, it would usually be a bird or maybe a small mammal, and it's really interesting to see how different species behave. For example, the barbet, which you see on the left, is it's a bird that keeps moving all the time. It's a bird that eats fruit mostly. And the purple sunbird will mostly drink nectar, and it will eat very, very small insects. So the purple sunbird will never sit in one place. Very difficult bird to photograph, difficult bird to see also. But behavior of species is very different. And when they are feeding, you can see some of that behavior, which is very interesting. The third thing that can go in your nature journal, an important aspect, is of course reproduction and coating. These are plain tiger butterflies that are mating. Obviously, reproduction and coating are very important aspects of any life cycle of any species, right? And if you live in a place which is slightly moist, butterflies, you can bring butterflies to your garden quite easily. A lot of us, actually, we may not know it, but a lot of butterflies exist in our gardens. Caterpillars exist in our gardens. So if you see a caterpillar or a larva on your plants, please don't kill it, let it be. It's not going to kill your plant. It is going to make a chrysalis or a pupa, and it's going to become a butterfly or a moth. And it's a very interesting life cycle to see. Then we come to nesting. Again, a lot of us have associated our childhood with bird nests. And like I said, I think we are all born naturalists. We just forget as we grow older. So this is the nesting season. This is a recent photograph. That's a yellow-footed green pigeon. And it has broken off this piece of twig from this shirish tree to make a nest. And let me just tell you what I saw recently. I saw another yellow-footed green pigeon. It was trying to make a nest. It's amazing how difficult it is for them to find nesting material, which is why I have observed recently a lot of birds using plastic and using kind of chemicals like paint shavings and things put in their nest because they're not able to find twigs. And I observed a yellow-footed green pigeon going to a subabul tree, which was very dry, and breaking off the twigs, and then flying to a shahtut tree and sitting there hiding from other birds or other predators, and then going to an ashok tree to make its nest. So just to get the twigs and bring it back to its nest, it had to do this round between 3 trees. I saw it doing it 10 times, 12 times in a few minutes. And if you are observing a tree, I will go back to the fact that observing a tree is a wonderful way to start your nature journal. Observing a tree, if it has a nest in it, is a very exciting experience. You must make sure that you don't disturb the bird. You must make sure it can't see you, and it should not fly away and abandon its nest. But just to say that it is very difficult for them. It's not so easy for them to make nests and to find nesting material that is useful for them. The other exciting thing about breeding or courtship is that a lot of birds will change their colors literally while they are breeding in order to be attractive, and that's exciting to see. So you see on the right, that's actually the purple sunbird. That's the male purple sunbird, and he kind of looks like the female over there. It's called eclipse plumage. He loses that bright purple color because he doesn't want to be noticed, because that's not the breeding season. So that's the male purple sunbird sitting on this beautiful purple colored garlic wine flowers. And you see the other photograph on the left, that is the male purple sunbird, and he's come in breeding plumage. So not only is he's kind of blue and purple, but you can see this yellow and red patches on his shoulders. So the male that has the brightest colors and the loudest song is going to get the female. And this is another exciting thing to see in a nature journal, how they change their behavior, how they start singing songs, how they change their colors during the courtship. And every nature journalist would love to see that. Then we come to migration. Exciting, because migration is one of those phenomena that we don't really understand. So we don't understand really how birds know where to go. We don't understand how suddenly they come and one day there's no bird and the next day there are so many of them. So this is a samal tree that I journal every day, and this samal tree is full of a bird called rosy starlings. Now they come from Central Asia, and one day they're not there, the next day the whole tree is full of them. And it's actually related to the mena. It's a starling, and it eats it drinks nectar, it eats fruit, and it actually comes to South India, and then it comes to Delhi. So I'm in Delhi, and by the time it comes to Delhi to go back to Europe, the samal flowers have fallen off. So you can see these pods have cotton in them. So they're sitting on the tree, they're not really feeding. Again, you would not know that if you don't have a nature journal. So when we are looking at the bird, we are trying to observe, is it migratory? What is it doing? Is it feeding? Is it coating? What are the basic things it's trying to do? So when we're trying to cover flowering, we're trying to cover feeding, we're trying to cover courtship, we're trying to cover migration, we're trying to see what our subject is really doing at that time. So what were these guys doing at that time? They were sitting there and they were fighting amongst each other and talking and chattering. They're very noisy birds, very interesting birds. And they were not feeding on the samal, but they were feeding on people. So that's the next picture. So this is a rosy starling feeding on a peepal tree, which has a lot of figs. As I said, they eat a lot of fruit. And they come from Europe, as I said, East Europe and Central Asia. And on the right is a picture from Orissa that I had taken in Mangalajori on a very cold, foggy morning. So the birds flying in the sky, those are black-tailed godwits, also migratory. And the birds right below are the bar-headed geese. The bar-headed geese have come probably from Tibet. So they fly really high. They fly over the Himalayas, and they have this amazing ability to chill their lungs and to chill their bodies while flying, because otherwise they would not be able to fly in such cold situations. So they chill their body, they slow down their metabolism while flying over the Himalayas every year, twice a year. They come and then they return when it becomes too hot for them. Very exciting thing for any nature lover to document. So if you're starting to document migratory birds, make sure you write down when did they come, how many are there, can you tell the difference between male and female, what do they do, where do they feed, what are the places they like to go. Because if you want to save migratory birds, it's important that we try to understand how they use the habitat. So some birds like the bar-headed geese will need water. So we need to save many kinds of wetlands, not just one. When they come from migration, they're really tired. So they need as many wetlands as possible. Sometimes they need wetlands to rest in, other wetlands they need to feed in. So just imagine, put yourself in their place. What are the things that you need in your life? You need to watch a movie, you need to have coffee with your friends, you need to read a book, you need to rest, you need to relax, you need to work, you need to do all these things. The same for birds and wildlife as well. There are a few places it needs for feeding. There are a few places it needs for resting. So, for example, the rosy starlings on the samal, they're not feeding, they're resting. And in the next photograph, the rosy starling needs the peepal tree to eat. And that also shows us how important it is to have different kinds of trees and different diversity of trees. Because if you only have samal, and that's all you have, and the rosy starlings come to Delhi, at which time the samal doesn't have flowers, what is a rosy starling going to eat? So we need a good mix of different Indian species to help all give feeding to all these animals. These are the flyways of the world. For those who joined my last webinar, I spoke about it. You see India in the middle in lime green. We are part of the Central Asian flyway, and there are 9 flyways in the world. So these birds are making really long migrations. So mostly for us, it's the north to south migration. They come from Europe and Central Asia, and they come southwards, and they come to India, to Sri Lanka, little bit of the islands of Southeast Asia they touch, and they go back. There are a few birds that fly from India to Australia as well, but those are a few. Most of the birds will stop in India. So India is a very important, perhaps the most important country in this flyway, because below India is the sea. And therefore, what India does for these birds is absolutely critical to them living. I wanted to also come to the next point, perhaps the most complex of all points. So for the Nature Journal, we've spoken about flowering, we've spoken about feeding, about courtship, about how the animals look and behave. The most complex and the most interesting aspect are the interrelationships. And every good nature journal should have notes on what are the interrelationships that species have. So do they have enemies? You've heard of the mongoose and the cobra that hate each other, the tiger and the elephant who can't stand each other. But there are also many species that work together. This has been sent to me by my colleague Sushmita Karmakar, and this is a photograph that she's taken. It's the interrelationship between ants and aphids. So the aphids are the tiny green insects that you see on the stem. And what is the ant doing? So if you look at the ant, it seems like the ant is killing the aphid, but actually the ant is not killing the aphid, it is farming the aphid. What it's doing is it basically protects these aphids from other predators, and in return the aphid secretes this kind of like a honey kind of substance which the ant eats. So basically the ant is the bodyguard for the aphid, and they have developed this relationship which a lot of species develop to survive. And the aphids are like cows for the ant, and the ant is the bodyguard, and this is how the two get along. You will learn of many such interrelationships if you begin to observe a particular thing every day. So my advice is, look at a tree every day, notice what's on it. Or if a tree is too far for you, observe a plant. Make sure there are no chemicals around it. Start observing what comes to it. What are the butterflies or the bees or the birds that come to it, and make notes of it every day until you get better. And you will certainly be surprised by all the things that you are able to see. What's the time? 8 o'clock. Okay. Right. Now we're going to come to the second part of this webinar, which is how really you can get published. I know a lot of people are very interested in nature writing in India, because nature writing actually is a very upcoming field. And you know, a lot of you would have read books by Jim Corbett or Kenneth Anderson, none of whom were really Indian. But now is the time, I feel, for a lot of Indians to get published, and it's really important that we should feel this involvement and ownership of our nature and our biodiversity, and we should try to get published. So it's important for us to think about what is really your skill. So what I mean to say is that, are you good at photography, or you want to be good at photography? Do you want to get published as a photographer, or do you want to get published as a writer, or do you want to get published as both? Whichever it is, it's important that you obviously start working on your skill. Now, suppose you want to be published as a writer. What are you going to do? So I would suggest then that it's important that you start collecting data. So as I'm saying, observe a tree, or observe a particular bird, or observe a particular natural feature every single day, and start by collecting data. So you saw the slide that I showed you on the Amalthas flowering. That is actually data collected on 60 trees from 2015 to 2018, which is important data, which gives important trends. So it's not just enough to just have some kind of opinion that today I saw this, yesterday I saw this. Try to observe it as much as you can in order to have an informed perspective on the subject you want to write about. For example, I want to write on yellow-footed green pigeon. What am I going to do? I'm going to observe it every day for a minimum of 30 days before I decide that I want to write about this, right? So I will try to talk about its nesting. I will try to talk about what it eats. What did I see it eating? Which trees does it sit on? What are the other birds that disturb the yellow-footed green pigeon. And what are the other birds the yellow-footed green pigeon is totally okay with? So these are the kind of things that I can notice. And what is the courtship behavior? What is the behavior of the bird at different times of the day? So for example, for this pigeon, you know, a lot of people, it's a common bird in the cities, and a lot of people in Maharashtra know this bird because it's your state bird. It's a common bird, but people don't ever see it. Many people say, oh my God, where did you get this bird from? And I'm like, I got it from Delhi. It's all over Delhi. It's not very visible in the daytime. It's a very shy bird. So you can see it in the mornings. It suns itself on the top of trees. That's another interesting thing. Different bird species like to sit in different parts of the tree. They're very particular. So this guy will sit at the top of the tree, and it will sit there in the evenings and the mornings. During the daytime, it hides. It hides so well that it's really difficult to find it. Okay, so you want to write, you want to get published, it's important you should have some data. So definitely start collecting data. Write notes which with dates. This is what you saw, whatever you're writing about. This is what you saw, this is what it ate, this is what it did. And certainly record any unusual observations. So for example, this red-naped ibis eating a samel flower is an unusual thing to see, because normally they eat snakes, as I said, and insects. So write that down. Take pictures if you have a camera. And when you have a camera, somebody asked me this question today, how to make folders of your photographs. I'll tell you what I do. I take a picture and I save the picture, the name of the picture I save with the date and with the particular thing that that picture is showing. So for example, I will save pioneer butterfly photograph is pioneer butterfly feeding March 15th. Okay, and I will make a folder species wise, or I will make a folder tree wise. If I'm studying the samel, then I have a folder called samel on my computer, in which I put in everything that I see in a day, date wise. So I'm naming the photograph so it's easy for me to find with the date and the characteristic that I found in the photograph. That's an important way. Don't just dump your photographs on your computer. It's very difficult to find what you're looking for. Make sure when you're editing your pictures, you name them with the date and what you're trying to describe in the photo. It'll help you a lot. Now, the third thing that's really important, I'm a consulting editor with Sanctuary Asia. I will certainly help you get published if you have written something interesting, but it's important for you to remember, who are you writing for, okay? So a lot of people get confused. What is your target group? What are you trying to say? If you're writing for children, for example, then you have to keep it simple and interesting. Then it has to be very visual. It has to be very fun. Like, children are really bad critics. They really, if you don't have their attention in 5 seconds, they will not even look at you again. So it has to be super interesting. If you're writing for adults, then you can be a little bit more serious, but all writing should be interesting. So it's important for you, before you start writing, to think about who you want should read your piece. If you're writing something for children, it has to be easy language and interesting, full of events. It has to have things happening, right? If you're writing for adults, it can be a little bit more complex language, and it can be a little bit more in the way that we are speaking right now. It's just conversational language. And I also want to say that, you know, it's not necessary that you have to write in English. You should write in whatever your language you are comfortable in, or whatever language is your regional language, because we need nature writing in every language. And if you know Raju Kasambe, who is my friend and colleague, he has written books in Marathi on butterflies, on birds, and I think that really adds to the local knowledge of biodiversity, and it adds to the local pride as well. And therefore, if your English is not good, or if you want to write in your local language, please go ahead and we can talk about how that can be possible. But don't let language stop you. It should not stop you. The first thing you need to do is to start looking at nature, making notes, taking data, and starting to write. Language is no longer a barrier. Okay. Where are the places that you can get published? First, I want to show you this beautiful bird. This is actually the female of the purple sunbird. She's kind of olive on top. kind of cream on her stomach and yellow as well, and she's sitting in the neem tree. As you have guessed by now, I study the neem every day, around the same time every day, and I study what comes on it, what happens, which birds like each other, which birds hate each other, which butterflies come on the neem. So this is the beautiful female sunbird, and she was drinking nectar from these tiny neem flowers. Okay, so what are the publishing outlets? The first are magazines. So we have wildlife magazines in India, which I will show you in the next slide. We have websites, which I will also show you in the next slide. We also have newspapers. And, you know, again, here is what I want to say, that newspapers in every language do have sections on environment and science. So you can write in Hindi for Rajasthan Patrika, Amar Ujala. You can write in Marathi. You can write in Telugu, whatever language. You just have to make sure your write-up is good enough. And if you have a camera, it really helps if you can take pictures along with your writing. Sometimes a lot of authors get published first in terms of pictures getting published, because papers are also looking for interesting pictures. And sometimes people will get published with their photographs, with the photo caption before they get published with an article. So that's also fine as long as you start getting published. Then there are these social media groups, and social media groups are also interesting because there are many very specialized social media groups now. So you have Indian Birds, for example, on Facebook. You have the Indian biodiversity portal. You have eBird, where it's not for articles, but you can just upload your observations and your data, and you have many like-minded people over there who can also share their observations with you, and you can gather more perspective. And I also tell people that, you know, if you haven't gotten published anywhere, start by writing long posts on your own blog, or even on your Facebook, or your any other platform that you may have, and it will help you describe what you're feeling. With nature writing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to describe what we saw, and it's very difficult to do that. So if I want to describe this beautiful sunbird sitting amongst neem flowers, it takes me 2 minutes to think what I should say. So we are trying to describe what we have seen, what we have observed over many days. So it takes time. It takes a little bit of, practice. So start by practicing by making your social media posts. It's great practice. And then you can try to get published. So these are just three that I'm showing you here. They're in English. The first is Sanctuary Asia, which is the oldest wildlife magazine in India. The second is Round Glass Sustain. It's a new website. Please go look it up. It only does wildlife. It's a good website. It's not a magazine, but it's an online thing, and they accept a lot of they are now accepting a lot of articles. So you don't need to be a famous author to get published over there. And a lot of they're also publishing a lot of photographs. So if you're taking good photographs, then you have a very good chance to get published in Round Glass Sustain. Then there's Save Us magazine, which is a hard magazine which comes out in India as well. And I'm happy to help you. You can get in touch with my colleagues at CEC Bombay, and they will put you in touch with me. I'm happy to help you if you are willing to work hard at your article. I promise you that if you start observing nature, and if you start looking every day, you're going to find incredible things, and you will have a lot of material to write on. It never disappoints. You have to wait a little. Sometimes in nature, you have to have patience, but you will never be disappointed. And finally, I want to say that citizen science is a new thing in India, and it's really exciting. So I named eBird earlier. So eBird is a portal where you can put all your bird lists, all the birds that you've seen in a day or a week. You can make your own lists, and you're adding to knowledge, because they make maps of birds, where birds are found, where they're feeding, where they're migrating. They make these maps worldwide, and it's very important that people should, basically add to this data. So earlier times, as I said, people used to make, paintings and illustrations, as part of the nature journal. And now people, those nature journals have kind of gone online. So from your books, they have become come to websites, and it's adding to global databases. BNHS also has the Common Bird Monitoring Program. So please follow the Facebook page of BNHS, and you can take part in many bird counts that are held. We have a Baya Weaver bird count. We have bird counts for flamingos. We have bird counts on Salim Ali's birthday, etc. In which again we are trying to see what are the birds that are there, and we're trying to make lists, and we're trying to add to global knowledge on these birds. I finally wanted to say that you can also consider becoming a member of the NHS, and these are the things that you will get. You get the Hornbill magazine, and here is where I want to say that Hornbill is a magazine like Sanctuary or Save Us, and we take a lot of articles as well. We don't have as many pages as Sanctuary, but we accept articles. Again, if you want my help, I'm happy to help you. I may take a little bit of time to respond, but I will always respond, and I'm happy to help you if you want to be published. It's a beautiful magazine, and it's very long running. It's been running for many years, and it's free for all the members of BNHS. We have a beautiful library full of invaluable books. Some of those books can never be moved because they are very old. And we have nature camps in which members are taken on nature camps at special rates. And of course, we have a lot of volunteering options. For those of you in Mumbai, you can always go to the Bombay CEC, Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Those in Delhi can go to Asola Wala Sanctuary. We also have CEC in Nagpur, and a few more are coming up in various parts. I think we can take questions now. Viraj, if we can have the questions now, please.
Yeah, so thank you very much for wonderful insight on this topic. And now I please request everyone to type their questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I will try and read out the questions for you, Neha.
Yeah.
The first question is from Azhar.
Okay.
He's asking, what are the ethics to be ensured during nature journalism?
Okay. Thank you. It's a very important question. So I'll take you back to this nesting slide. The first thing to remember is that the animal comes first. So whatever you want to do, maybe you want to write an article, take a photograph, make sure that the welfare of the animal should come first. So when I took a picture of this bird, I was very far away. I took one picture and I left because I don't want this bird to get disturbed by my presence. So your first ethic to remember, I think the only ethic really is that the bird or the animal has to come before you. Whatever you're doing, you cannot disturb it. Whatever you're doing, do not cause anything that will make the life of the animal more difficult. Let me show you another picture, which I took recently of yellow-footed green pigeon. Yeah, let's move to the next question meanwhile.
Yeah, so the next question is from Jayanti.
Okay.
Is there any application available to record nature journal?
No, but you can, the best thing, this is the yellow-footed green pigeon family. And it's, again, on the meme, I was very lucky because this was during the lockdown and I was really sad to be trapped in one place. And these are the two chicks with the mother. And to answer Azhar's question, I was hiding. I made a hide for myself when I would take these pictures and made sure that they don't see me. And I took one picture every day and I left. I also don't put up any nest pictures ever. So most of my photography is just of the bird doing other things. Okay, second question on application. We don't have an app in India right now, but certainly please go and see eBird. I think it's a very interesting and a very alive place with thousands and thousands of bird watchers basically uploading their observations of birds every day. And I also suggest that you just start with like a, this kind of thing. this is what I have. I have this in a million colors. So just, I write, and I actually also paint. I like doing that, but you can just write every day, and it's just great. And I have this one as well, and this one is handmade, and it's just full of my notes every day that I write. And the beauty of sort of like a book, a beauty of that is that you can read it many years down the line. A lot of bird watchers have hundreds of such journals. I'm not kidding, like hundreds. They have a room in their house just for that. So try that. I would suggest that.
Okay. So the next question is from Miss Ankita Das.
Okay.
She is asking, is writing nature-based poetry also valued?
I value it if that helps. But see, I'll tell you, it's difficult generally to get poetry published because poetry, not everybody understands it. But absolutely, the all the places that I showed you, whether it's Hornbill, let me go back to that slide, whether it's Hornbill or Sanctuary or Save Us, they will all publish poetry. Obviously, it has to be good. So definitely try it. In fact, a lot of people, a lot of poets actually uh, became writers because of nature, and a lot of their writing is about nature. So this is it's never say never. Try it. It may take some more time to get published because people don't understand poetry, but certainly it can be done. So keep trying till you write a poem that's beautiful enough to touch the editor's heart. And yes, poetry does get published on these platforms.
So next question is from Mr. Ganesh.
Okay.
He is asking, when we are out on the field trip, say birding for example,
Yeah.
we observe so many things.
Yeah.
How can we nature journal all observation these things? Like,
okay, so yes, you'll see a lot of things. You need to prioritize. So for me, I have a few species that I like to observe more than others because I want to study those species well. So for example, this year I want to study the neem tree. Last year I was studying the samel tree. So I have my priorities, but for the other things that you're seeing, go back to it the next year. And I think it's a wonderful way to live your life. It's a wonderful way to live your life through trees and birds and things like that, because life is hard, right? Life is hard, and we need something constant. So my suggestion is, try to narrow down your focus and write down about that, and go back to the other things you saw the next year. Don't let it go. It'll be a part of your life. But certainly this is the way that I do it. There's no one perfect way, but that's how I do it. Yeah.
the next question is from Mugdha.
Okay.
She is asking whether there is any particular time span for observing the events and then making record of it and publishing it.
Okay. That's a good question, Mugdha. So if you're studying birds, then early morning is the best time. That's when they are most active, just after sunrise. And they're also active in the evening. It's called the golden hour. There's a particular time where the light is slanting and it's not too hot. If you're studying butterflies, then butterflies are more active when it's sunny. So most butterflies like to be out in the sun. So you will not see butterflies early in the morning, or you may not even see them in the evening. You'll see them around, depending on where you are and how sunny it is, you'll see them when the sun has come up and surfaces have become warm. Regarding news value, or how fast you need to write, see, it's not like writing a news story in which you have to immediately get published. It's not like that. And these publications are not like that either. So Sanctuary, for example, is published not every month, but once in every 2 months. And Hornbill has special issues in which it may focus just on one topic. So no, you don't have to be in a very big hurry. But what you can do is that you can link it to some other topic. So for example, if you're studying bats, this is a good time to write on bats because of COVID, and people are killing bats and they're scared of bats. They think bats are horrible. So, you can link what you're studying to some or what you're journaling to some event in the world, but it is not like a news story in which you have to immediately get published. It's important to write a good piece with good observations first. That's the first priority. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Anil.
Okay.
He is asking, usually newspapers don't accept the photographs if they are not from famous photographers. What can be done in this case?
See, newspapers are very difficult to get through to because a newspaper is a very big organization. It is, I would suggest that you start with these websites or you start with these magazines that I've shown you, because newspapers already have their own photographers. Magazines don't always have their own photographers. It's always difficult to get into any sector. So certainly my advice, unless you know journalists very well who can help you, please try with Round Glass Sustain, for example. Try with Save Us, try with Sanctuary, and it may be difficult in the beginning, but you have to keep trying. And you can also start by putting up pictures on Indian Birds or the Facebook groups. There are many Facebook groups now in India which are extremely active, 5,000 members, 10,000 members. And in that way, you can start getting known, and maybe people will also begin to approach you. Please don't start with newspapers. It's really difficult. So one newspaper has 500 employees, for example. They already have a team of 10 photographers. Their priority is to publish the photographers that they are paying salaries for first. So please start with wildlife magazines or wildlife websites, or even the Facebook groups in the beginning. And you'll also become famous one day. So it's all right. We all start with no one knowing us. Yeah.
So Dr. Dishant is asking, how authentic the popular articles are considered in scientific research?
It depends on what the topic is. So there are many scientific articles that look at popular science communication and will reference them. So for example, I'm a reviewer for a couple of scientific journals, and we certainly have a lot of referencing of news articles or popular science articles that have come out in credible places. So a credible place would be a well-known, respected, say, newspaper or magazine. See, the point of any science communication, any nature writing, is we have to be authentic and true. So, this is the very point of the conversation we are having, is that we are trying to write something that has happened, something that is authentic. Because, it's like they say in Hindi, what do they say? Jungle mein mor nacha, kisne dekha. So like, nobody's there to see what you're saying. So therefore you must always be speaking the truth. And it also depends on what your goal is. Is your goal to become a popular writer? If that is your goal, you don't have to worry about scientific journals. But all writing has to be true, authentic. You have to make it. You have to ask the experts. If you don't know yourself, try to get a couple of opinions before you get published. But short answer to the question is, many journals definitely use good popular science articles in their references, and they are respected in that sense.
Okay. So next question is from Miss Nikita.
Okay.
She is saying, I saw many people doing nature journaling in the form of art illustrations, like sketches or paintings.
Yeah.
Since we are so used to recording observations with our camera, it's slightly difficult to make it on the spot journal.
Right.
So what would you recommend on this?
Well, it's everyone's wish how they want to nature journal. If you want to use your camera, that's fine. If you feel like painting or sketching, that's fine. It's totally up to you. Maybe one day don't take your camera. Maybe one day you take, a pen and paper and just draw a sketch. So it's not necessary. It is necessary to take data every day. So how you take the data is up to you. And I think, everyone doesn't like making illustrations. So not everybody can do it. So if you can do it, please try it. And like I said, all of us started illustrating through nature. Like when we were small children, that's what we used to draw, the flowers and butterflies and plants and trees. That's what we used to draw. So try doing a mix also to keep it interesting for yourself. It's not a punishment. It's something you're doing for fun, right? Something you're doing for enjoyment and to learn more about nature. So it's totally up to you. I also do a lot of sketching. Sometimes I do the camera, and sometimes I do sketches. Yes.
Okay. So are there any books related to nature writing or journaling that you would recommend?
Mm, well, you can see some of the links on Google. You can just type nature journaling, and there are many links that will show you tips on how you can do it, or how to illustrate also. I mean, there aren't any books that I've seen for nature journaling, but there are books that are basically a product of the person having kept a journal, meaning the person has observed something every day and has then written a book. So for example, Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh, who is a well-known conservationist, he has written a book called A Life in Wildlife. Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh, A Life in Wildlife, and his entire book is a product of all the observations that he's had throughout his career. So he'll talk about Mishmi Takin, he'll talk about tiger, leopard, great Indian bustard. Then there's Dr. A.J.T. John Singh, he's also a conservationist. He's also written a book in which he's talked about all the data that he has, all the observations he has, he's written them down. Jim Corbett is also a good author to read because he also used to observe wildlife, and that's what he wrote about. And if you want to read more books, there's an author called Robert MacDonald, and Robert MacDonald is also on Instagram and on Twitter, so do look him up. In fact, you can follow these Instagram and Twitter handles. They post every day, and they post a lot about what they're seeing every day, and that's really interesting. That's a nature journal in itself. Then the Guardian newspaper has a column called I think it's called Country Voice. Just look it up. The Guardian newspaper, Country Voice, in which they have this column every week on what the author has seen in wildlife. And it's basically a nature journal in which this flower is flowering, this butterfly has come, this migratory bird has come, this animal is nesting, things like that. So look that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many questions I am seeing right now. Would you like to continue or?
Yeah, sure. Let's try to get I'll try to answer all the questions really fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how to describe a bird when we don't know the idea of it?
Good question. Okay, so it's very difficult. All right, never feel that you don't know, because there are 1,300 birds, 1,330 birds in India. There are 13,000 birds in the world. Okay, even I don't know all the birds that are there. So try to note down the characteristics, or try to take a picture. Okay, so what was the color? What was the shape of the beak? What was the length of the tail? What are the talons or the claws like? Okay, and try to then with that description, you will have to search in a bird book, a nature guide such as Grimmett and Inskip is a good one. Birds of Indian Subcontinent, written by Salim Ali, is another one. You have to go through the pictures and try to recognize the bird. Try typing it in Google. There's also another app called the Internet of Birds, which was made along with BNHS and Accenture Asia. So over there, you have to upload a picture. So it identifies the bird for you. It's called Internet of Birds. Okay, next question.
Yeah. Do nature journals should be strictly fact-based, or can we share our experience along with it?
It has to be both, because whatever you're writing, it should, it is also about your experience. So the fact always has to be there. The emotion and the feeling is optional, but both are good, because you want to describe what you felt when you saw a samel tree covered in red flowers, or a laburnum tree covered in yellow flowers. It's a wonderful thing to see, and there's a lot of joy in that. Fact always has to be there. Emotion is very desirable if it's there. Next question.
So next question is, how is the authenticity of the data is checked before publishing?
So typically the publisher will ask you questions. You will get the manuscript back, whatever you've written, you'll get it back with a lot of questions. When was this? What did happen? have to answer those questions. More than anything, you have to be honest. Please don't make up things. Just write whatever you have seen or observed. Try not to put any more, drama around that. Any good publisher is going to ask you questions. It's a good thing to be asked questions. It means that the place where you're writing is a place that values authenticity. So for example, Sanctuary Asia will send you your manuscript back with many questions. Hornbill will send you back your manuscript with even more questions. So be prepared. If your facts are correct, there's nothing to worry about. And usually it's a peer review process. If it's a very complicated thing, they may send your article to other people, other scientists or other knowledgeable people, and they will read the manuscript and ask questions or ask for clarifications or comments, leave comments, and that is how authenticity is checked. Next question.
How can we stay relevant in observing nature regularly in our hectic routine?
How you can stay relevant? I think nature is the most relevant because, right now we have a lockdown, but nature carries on just like ever. And nature has been a very important source of mental health and peace and solace for many people. There's a book called, I think it's called Bird Tonic, if I'm not wrong. There's an author who had mental health issues, and bird watching saved his life. I have another friend who had cancer, and he's saying birds have saved his life because he basically started observing birds and he forgot about feeling sad about his disease, and it helped him heal. I think nature, we keep forgetting that we are also animals. We need to be connected with the natural world. I think it's very relevant to be connected to nature, and I think it's very, very meditative. When you're studying a butterfly, it's gone in like 2 seconds. So you have to really focus your mind, to be really still, and that's a meditative experience. I think nature will always be extremely relevant. But you can also connect what you're writing to any event that's happening in the world, such as climate change or coronavirus or epidemics or, drought or flood or anything of that sort.
Okay. Can you talk about the importance of a botanist or options for a botanist in nature journals?
Yeah, I think botanist is very important. I started this talk by saying that, plants form the basis of many ecosystems. Studying a plant can show us a lot about interrelationships, about feeding, about refuge. So studying, for example, that neem tree is showing me how many animals are coming on it or feeding on it or resting in it or using it, as a resource for taking away twigs for nesting. Very important, extremely important. We need botanists. We need more and more botanists. And also, botanists are also important because they study phenology, which is the fruiting and flowering of a plant. And my advice to any botanist is not just to make nature journals, but also to find out what are the right plants for a particular place, because oftentimes we have the wrong plants and the wrong trees in the places where we live in. We should, instead of having so many exotic foreign species, we need to have more and more Indian species. So extremely important to have botanists in nature journals, and extremely important for botanists to also come up with recommendations for the rest of us. I'm not a botanist. I would be happy to hear recommendations on which are the right plants to have in various different places. Next question.
Okay. So how could you suggest to identify the nests of particular bird when the bird is not around?
Well, the bird is going to come back, so you have to wait unless the nest is abandoned. So they keep coming back. They're either the nest is used only for a short period of time. So either it's making the nest, or it's raising its chicks, or it's incubating its eggs, right? So you have to wait. And nature journaling is also about patience. You have to either try to look for a longer period of time every day, or just try to look even for a shorter period of time, but do it every day. So if you're not doing it every day, then you may have to do it for longer periods of time, whenever you are doing it. So if you can't see the bird, it's going to come back. If it's using a nest, it will come back very fast. Make sure you're hidden so that the bird doesn't see you and doesn't get disturbed.
So next question is, what should the journal look like exactly, and how can we make it interesting?
Well, you can you can write the facts like, okay, I saw 100 rosy starlings today. Out of this, so many were males and so many were females. That's a species, composition, right? So you write the facts in an interesting way, which is relevant to you. So I saw these many were males, these many were females. Any unusual behavior you saw, a rosy starling was sitting in a particular part of the tree, and a crow came and attacked it and it fought back, or it ate something that you don't know the rosy starlings eat. Whatever interesting observation you've seen, you write that down. And importantly, write down what you also felt, what was your feeling. And see, the thing is, the nature journal in itself is not going to get published. The nature journal that you are keeping, this book, is for you. It is what you pull out of this nature journal which is going to get published. But to make it interesting for your own self, you can try making sketches. You can try, let me see if I have it here. You can try having, these leaves and seeds and all of that kind of stuff, because I always do that. Yeah, I do have it here. So in all my books, I have something like this. I guess I've never grown up. Ever since I was a little girl, I was always carrying stones and flowers and petals and things. So all my books have either a fern or a leaf, and sometimes I'll stick them in my nature journal. That's interesting for me to see. And when you stick it, you can coat it with Fevicol spray so it doesn't get destroyed, or you can put a film on it so it doesn't break. And that's interesting, as long as it's interesting for you. It should be interesting for you. From that nature journal, you pull out things and write a different article, or make a photo caption. So that is for the whole world. This journal is for you to see. Make it interesting. You decide what you like.
Okay. So next question is from Miss Haripriya. She is saying that one coppersmith barbet keeps knocking on her balcony glass all the time.
Okay.
So can you suggest what could be the reason behind?
It's knocking on your balcony glass because your glass is probably reflective and it's seeing its own reflection and it's hitting it. It's probably a male that thinks that there's another male bird and they get hurt like that. So please, if you could put a different surface on the glass if it's possible, because a lot of birds actually get hurt or your glass will get broken. Some birds do it more than others. Peacocks do this a lot, babblers do this a lot, and coppersmith barbets do it a lot. If you can just put a cloth over there, or maybe you can consider leaving some portions of your reflective glass as normal glass in which it can look through, then it would be of use. Otherwise, keep a plant outside your window and break the vision, break the line of vision of the bird so that it doesn't, see itself. It's basically trying to hit at what it thinks is another bird. Yeah.
Okay. How can we submit the articles in Hornbill?
Okay. You want to submit articles in Hornbill, you get in touch with the CC team and they can send it to the publications department. We have a publications department in BNHS which is dedicated to Hornbill and to our BNHS journal, and they will process it, and if they like it, they will get back to you. You may have to wait a while, but they will get back to you. This is what they do, and you can also get your photographs published in Hornbill. So you can write to them and the CC team can give you their email address.
Okay. So next question is how much does nature journaling contribute to government agendas and conservation work?
I think it contributes to conservation because all good conservationists have kept nature journals, because the important part about conservation is that we're trying to save something that does not speak English or Hindi or Marathi or Tamil or any other language. We are trying to save animals which basically we are only guessing at what they need. And, in order to be correct in knowing what they need, we need to study them. And nature journals are a way to study the subject. A lot of people become full-time researchers and they've all started from nature journals. Okay, so everyone has started with this book and everyone has, basically graduated. Some of them have studied more and are doing that full time in their work. In terms of government agendas, I think the government is blind to nature. I think the government needs more citizens keeping nature journals, because sometimes protests work. It's wonderful that people come together for environmental causes. It's wonderful that people came together for RA, even if it didn't work. Even in Delhi, people came together to save the trees. I think one of them should be here, if I'm not wrong, to save the trees of Delhi. And if you keep a nature journal, you are starting a relationship with nature, which hopefully will last you your whole life. And you can then raise a voice, and you can get other citizens to come together and raise a voice. I don't think the government cares very much, but the government should always face pressure from us citizens, because they're not able to see what we see, and we have to make them see the good things about nature. Yeah.
Okay, so what qualifications are necessary to professionally publish articles, and can you actually make a profit out of it?
A qualification necessary is that you should definitely observe nature and collect as much data as you can. Try to make your writing better. Try to get good photographs, take good photographs. There are a lot of people there with lots of cameras now, so it is important. The biggest qualification you need is to be patient, I would say, because sometimes you're taking a picture of wildlife and nothing goes right. It starts raining, the animal goes away. You have to be at it. You have to try 100 times before you get two good photographs. So just be patient. And in terms of making money out of it, all these publications will pay. It's not too much though. So I don't know if you can make a living out of it. You can make a living out of being a nature guide or being a naturalist in terms of like tourism. You can make money out of that. And all naturalists keep nature journals, or they keep record in some way or the other of what they've seen. And I would suggest find some naturalists on Instagram or Twitter and follow their profiles and see how they write or how they are recording nature. And it will give you a sense. So I don't think you can make a living just by publishing nature writing, because there's not so much money in it, but you can certainly make a living by being a naturalist in the tourism industry. Next question.
What is your say on nature journalism versus activism? Are they same or different?
See, your activism has to come from facts. Your activism should come from, something, any opinion that you have based on things that you've seen. You shouldn't be an activist based on what someone else is saying. As much as is possible, you should have your own opinion. So if you are fighting for trees not being cut, it should also be because you yourself have seen what the tree means for the bird or the flower or the butterfly or anything, right? So all activism needs to be evidence-based, in my opinion. I also consider myself to be an activist. I also consider a lot of work that BNHS does for conservation. It's not activism, but it's basically, trying to have good decision-making in conservation. And all of that comes from science, from research, from our observations, from our data. So, nature journaling is one step towards good activism, responsible activism. So don't be an activist because someone is telling you. Be an activist because you have formed your opinion on a particular topic, hopefully by seeing it with your own eyes.
Okay, so I guess we'll take just this last question.
Okay.
So can we keep a nature journal using just pictures?
Yes, absolutely. Your nature journal could be just visual. You could just, have folders on your computer or your cell phone of pictures you've taken every day. It's totally up to you. You're trying to observe something every day, something of your choice, and it's up to you how you want to do it. A lot of my nature journal also is photographs that I take. So my nature journal is photographs, text, illustrations, notes, hard copy and soft copy. So it's up to you. Yeah, you can do just photographs if you like. You can write long photo captions. You can save the photographs, as I said, with the date and a description with a long name for the photo to make it easier for you to understand. As long as you understand yourself what you have recorded, you can do it in any way you like. You can make videos also. Yeah.
Okay. So
okay.
I guess that's it from
Okay.
this webinar. And I would like to thank our speaker, Ms. Neha Sinha, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar.
Thank you. Yes, thanks to everyone, and thanks to my colleagues at BNHSCC and Viraj for hosting us. And if you have questions, I am on Twitter, Neha_Sinha. I don't think I've written it here. But you can get in touch with me on Twitter. And please, of course, follow the BNHS CEC page as well. And they can also answer nature-based questions for you. Thank you so much.